snapshot webinar on preferencing a school when your child or young person has an educational health and care plan. There are a number of issues to think about, and we recommend that you also watch our snapshot webinar on choosing a school. Your right to request a school. The Special Educational Needs Code of Practice says that when the local authority has agreed to issue an Educational Health and Care Plan or EHCP, the child's parent or the young person has the right to request a particular school, college or other institution. You may already know the educational setting you would like your child to attend, and as a parent or carer you have the right to express that preference. But how does the process work for making a preference for a school when your child has an EHCP? Let's look first at what the law says about this, and then consider educational settings you can ask to be named in the Educational Health and Care Plan. What does the law say? The Children and Families Act 2014 says that if a child's parent or a young person makes a request for a particular nursery, school or post-16 institution in these groups, the local authority must comply with that preference and name the school or college in the EHC plan unless it would be unsuitable for the age, ability, aptitude or SEN of the child or young person, or the attendance of the child or young person there would be incompatible with the efficient education of others or the efficient use of resources. It's important to have this in mind when you or your young person are expressing a preference for a particular educational setting. It isn't an automatic decision that the local authority will agree with your preference. Let's look at what efficient education and others means. The meaning of efficient education. The SEN Code of Practice says that efficient education means providing for each child or young person a suitable, appropriate education in terms of their age, ability, aptitude and any special educational needs they may have. The meaning of others. The SEN Code of Practice says that others is intended to mean the children and young people with whom the child or young person with an EHC plan will directly come into contact on a regular day-to-day basis. Which type of school do you need to think about? Schools fall into the following categories. A maintained nursery school, which is a local authority funded nursery, a maintained school, which is a local authority funded school, an academy, which is run by an academy trust and receives funding direct from the government, a free school, which is a school funded by the government. These schools are not allowed to use an academic selection process. A non-maintained special school. This is usually a not-for-profit school that is not maintained by the local authority. It provides for children with SEN. A further education or sixth form college, post-16 provision. An independent school. These are fee-paying schools. An independent specialist college. These provide specialist post-16 provision for young people with learning disabilities and or disabilities. Phase transitions. Phase transitions refers to the moves between primary to secondary and secondary to post-16 education. The SEN Code of Practice says that for children moving from Year 6 primary to Year 7 secondary or high school, their EHCP should be amended, naming their Year 7 placement by the 15th of February of the calendar year they are moving. And for young people moving from secondary school to post-16 education, their EHCP should be amended, naming their placement by the 31st of March of the calendar year they are moving. Ideally, the annual review should take place in the autumn term preceding these dates in order for parents and young people to preference the educational setting they feel would best meet needs. Some schools are holding the Year 6 and Year 11 transition review in the summer term of Year 5 and Year 10 in order to allow more time. Making your preference. For a child under 16, you should contact your child's SEN caseworker to let them know of your preference and ask them to consult with that setting. For a young person between 16 and 25 years old, the young person should let their SEN caseworker know their preference and ask them to consult with that setting. Some young people will need support to do this from a family member, friend or advocate. If this is your child's first EHCP or at annual review, you can express your preference via the form attached to the draft plan or via the annual review paperwork. When contacting your SEN caseworker to let them know your preference, we recommend that if you let them know via a phone call, that you follow this up with an email or letter to ensure you have a record of your request. The parent of a child in Year 6 should still preference a secondary school through the normal admissions process, but it will be dealt with in a different way. What happens next? The SEN Code of Practice says that the local authority must consult the governing body, principal or proprietor of the school or college concerned and consider their comments very carefully before deciding whether to name it on the child or young person's EHC plan, sending the school or college a copy of the draft plan. If another local authority maintains the school, they too must be consulted. As you can see, the local authority must consult with you or your young person's school preference. The Code of Practice doesn't give a time frame for this, so although it states must, this doesn't always happen immediately. For example, where a child or young person hasn't had an annual review very recently, the SEN caseworker will probably suggest calling an early annual review so that updated reports can be gathered. They will then send the educational setting a copy of the EHCP and ask them if they can meet the needs set out in the plan. The educational setting is expected to respond within 15 days. The local authority may also consult with other schools. As an example, where there are 2 special schools in one area, they may consult with both. Where a preference is made for a special school that is several miles away from a child or young person's home, they will probably also consult with the nearest special school. Decisions. The educational setting who have been consulted will let the local authority know if they feel they can meet need or not. The local authority will then let you know their decision as to allocation of a place. They will either finalise the EHCP naming your preference in section I, or finalise the EHCP naming another setting or type of setting. Other issues. What if you want to request a placement in a school that is not on the Secretary of State's approved list? Although a preference for one of these settings can be requested, the local authority does not have a duty to name that school or college. Having said that, they must have regard to the general principle in Section 9 of the Education Act 1996 that children are educated in accordance with their parents' wishes. What if you want a dual placement? The Code of Practice allows for dual placements to happen. It recognises that for some children, dual placements where they spend some time in mainstream and some in special school can be positive. This is also allowed for young people when their education might be shared between a mainstream provider and specialist college. What if a parent or carer or young person hasn't expressed a preference for an educational setting? Where this has happened, the local authority must specify mainstream provision in the EHCP unless it is against the wishes of the parent or carer or young person, or affects the efficient education of others. Sometimes when a named provider has not been found, the local authority will name the type of provision needed in Section I of the EHCP. Next steps. The Education Health and Care Plan is issued with your preference in Section I. You can now start looking at the transition process to the new setting. But what should you or your young person do if the EHCP does not contain your preference of education? Talk to us at Sendiass North Yorkshire, where we can give you impartial and confidential advice and information about your options. I hope that the information in this webinar has been helpful. Please check out the various resources we have available via our website at sendiassnorthyorkshire.co.uk, which includes fact sheets, other resources and signposting to other organisations. You could also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, which are valuable sources of information. If you want further advice, please contact us via our advice line. If you would like to learn more, check out our free workshops on a range of SEN issues. Please contact the Parent Carer Voice to register for courses. Contact details are on the screen. If you would like further information and support, please get in touch with us. If you have enjoyed this webinar, please let us know via our feedback form on our website. Thank you.